Have you ever felt utterly alone, like the world has pressed pause on your life, and wondered, is something wrong with me? That unsettling silence, that absence of cheering crowds can feel like punishment. But what if I told you it's actually a powerful invitation? A secret gateway to something far greater than what you imagined. The real meaning of being alone. We've all grown up hearing that being surrounded by people equals success, that the louder your applause, the more valuable you must be. Yet what if I told you that some of the most extraordinary life-shaping seasons happen far from the limelight, when no one is watching, when it seems like the world has forgotten you? Solitude is not a sign that something is broken inside you. It's not suffering, it's not rejection. It's a sacred season of separation, an intentional stripping away of distractions and noise. And yes, it can feel isolating at times. But what if that deep stillness, that quiet emptiness, is actually a grand design? Because what we mistake for being cast aside is often the early stages of being called forth into something far greater. Something beautiful is unfolding beneath the surface. The divine design behind your aloneness. Throughout history, this pattern repeats itself again and again. Before the breakthrough comes the wilderness. Before the crown, the quiet fields. Before the influence, the hidden prison. Jesus stepped away into the wilderness. No audience, no group, just solitude. David, destined to be king, shepherded sheep under wide-open skies, mostly unseen. Joseph, chosen to rule Egypt, sat forgotten in a cistern, and then in prison, completely alone. In those hidden places, those quiet, forgotten moments, something transformational was happening. Their character was being refined. Their faith was forged. Their identity wasn't built on applause, followers, or external validation. It was being rooted in purpose and clarity, shaped in silence and solitude. They were learning how to hear truth, not the world's noise but their Maker's whisper. Solitude as preparation, not punishment. Let's be real. We love the spotlight. We chase likes, retweets, followers. We pray for big stages and bright lights. But God often says, not yet. First, I will hide you. Why? Because in hiding your roots go deeper. In hiding, you learn to stand not on popularity, but on your purpose, a purpose crafted in the dark, tested in silence, polished away from public applause. When all the noise dies and the opinions fade, a new clarity emerges. Hearing becomes sharper, vision becomes clearer, strength is built, and your soul learns to stand not because of fans, but because of unshakable identity, the hidden companion. Here's the most surprising thing: when you think you're alone, you're not. In the stillness, in the quiet void, something divine is whispering. Something intentional is guiding your steps. That presence, even when unseen, walks with you. It speaks when the world is silent. And the more you lean in, the more you discover you were never left behind. What happens when you stop needing people's approval? As you grow into this hidden season, something shifts. 1. You stop seeking validation. No more craving likes or claps, rather your soul finds rest in deeper connection. 2. You stop chasing empty relationships, no longer filling your life with people just to fill a void. Now you're anchored in authenticity. 3. You realize your value doesn't depend on popularity. Instead, it's rooted in purpose. And purpose doesn't fade when the lights dim. Have you ever planted a seed in complete darkness? At first, there's no sign of life. But then beneath the surface, roots anchor themselves firmly. And only then does the shoot break through into the light, revealing its true strength and beauty. Embracing the hidden season. So when you find yourself alone, not by choice, but by circumstance, remember this: it's not a punishment, it's a process, a divine workshop where you're being shaped, polished, matured, where your story is being written beneath the surface, Are you resisting the silence or leaning into it? In that hidden season, you discover who you really are apart from the world's mirror. You learn to walk in purpose, not popularity. You develop faith that lasts not just for a moment, but for a lifetime. You cultivate character that withstands storms, tested quietly, yet proven eternally. And when your time finally comes, when it's time to step into the spotlight, you'll walk forward, not as someone desperate for applause, but as someone secure in calling, unwavering in purpose, and ready to change everything. Final invitation. So the next time you feel alone, don't run away from it. Instead, ask yourself, what is being built in me right now? What seeds am I secretly rooting? Who am I becoming in the silence? That stillness isn't empty, it's fertile. And in time, it will produce more than you ever imagined. When you start to hear that quiet presence walking with you, you'll realize you were never alone. You were being prepared. And as we reflect on what came before, that sacred solitude, where identity was refined, let's go one step deeper. You see, if a seed emerges too soon before its roots have taken hold, it withers under the weight of exposure. If it stretches toward the light before it's grounded in the dark, it falls. So many of us, driven by urgency or longing, are praying for fruit we haven't yet cultivated. We cry out for platforms, visibility, recognition, before we've endured the quiet process of preparation. But hear this: God, in His deep, unshakable love, won't promote us before we're ready to carry the weight of the blessing. Not because He's withholding, but because He's protecting. So don't despise your season of obscurity. Don't rush through the days that feel slow, silent, or even lonely. Those are the holy grounds of transformation. That's where your foundation is laid, not in front of crowds, but in the still space between you and your faith, between you and your fears, between you and your Creator. That's where your strength is forged. That's where healing takes root, where depth replaces noise. And guess what? You don't need a crowd to feel worthy. You don't need 100 hands clapping to believe in your value. All it takes is one whisper, one divine whisper from heaven that says, "I'm with you." And when God is with you, it really doesn't matter who isn't. When your hands feel empty but your heart is in His grip, you're exactly where you're supposed to be. Because He's not building you for applause, He's crafting you for purpose. He's not hiding you because you're inadequate. He's setting you apart because you're chosen. And if you remain faithful, in the silence, in the shadows, in the invisible places, then you will emerge. Not just visible, but vibrant. Not just seen, but steady, stronger, wiser, ready. Because solitude is not your punishment. It is your preparation. Now let me tell you what happens when the world goes quiet. When the calls stop rolling in. When the notifications fall silent. When the people who once filled your space begin to fade out. At first, it stings. It feels like loss, like rejection, like you've been abandoned in an empty room alone with only your thoughts. And that voice inside, the one you've been dodging for years, suddenly grows louder. That uncertain, trembling voice might be the most terrifying sound you've ever heard. But maybe that voice is not your enemy. Maybe it's your beginning. Because in that stillness where the world has nothing left to say, that's when your real dialogue starts. Not with others, but with yourself. Too often, we've handed our identity over to others' expectations. We've mimicked voices that weren't our own. We've danced to music we didn't choose. We've worn opinions like costumes layers that never quite fit. And we've pursued dreams handed down, not discovered. But in true solitude, that changes. In the silence, you begin to hear the difference, the striking contrast between who you were told to be and who you were created to become. That voice inside, it's not feeble, it's not broken, it's not gone, it's been buried beneath years of doubt, under disappointments, lost in distractions. But the silence is resurrecting it. And as it rises again, you realize something profound. You never lost your voice. It was simply overwhelmed by the static of the world, the demands of others, the relentless pressure to fit in. But now the noise is gone. Now you hear it: clarity, truth, calling, conviction. That voice, it's you. It's always been you. And this moment, this sacred season, is where God begins to teach you something deeper. He shows you how to stop outsourcing your value. He gently pulls you away from the desperation for external approval, from begging others to see you, to understand you, to celebrate you, because when you hear your own voice, again, truly hear it, you won't need applause to feel powerful. You'll already know who you are. Picking up from where we left off, right in that sacred silence where your voice began to rise, God is gently pulling you back. Back to a place where your voice finally matters more than their applause. A place where the noise of the crowd fades and your soul becomes your sanctuary. It's here, in this intimate space, that something profound begins to stir. Because when you start speaking, not to impress the world, but to awaken yourself, healing begins. Change begins. Real, lasting power begins. But it has to start with you. You've got to talk to yourself like someone who's headed somewhere meaningful, like someone who believes their life has weight, purpose, destiny. You've got to speak over yourself with grace, that covers with authority, that declares, and with faith, that moves mountains. It's time to stop repeating their criticism like it's scripture. Time to stop rehearsing their doubts like they define you. What did they say? It doesn't matter anymore. What did God say? What truths have been whispered to you in the stillness? What have you discovered in those private prayer-soaked moments where no one else was watching? That is the voice you follow. That is the voice you trust. Because here's something you need to know: no one can affirm you like the Holy Spirit can. No one can speak directly to your soul like heaven can. And when that divine voice begins to rise inside you, everything starts to shift. You begin to carry yourself differently. You walk with intention, not insecurity. You choose from a place of peace instead of panic. You stop performing for approval and start living from identity. And yes, you begin saying no to things that used to draw you in and saying yes to the calling that once terrified you. Not because someone else gave you permission, but because something deep within you finally spoke and you believed it. You received it as truth. And when you truly find your voice, you stop forcing yourself to fit into spaces that were never meant for you. You stop shrinking to make others feel more comfortable. You stop apologizing for your existence. You stop letting insecurity masquerade as your identity. Because now your voice, your real voice, becomes your compass. It reminds you of what you carry inside. It tells you that even if no one claps, you're still chosen. Even if no one stays, you're still worthy. Even if doors close, you're still in God's hands, and He's still making a way. Your voice doesn't just tell you where you've been, it tells you who you are becoming. It whispers, you're not forgotten, you're being formed. And in that stillness, in that quiet chamber of transformation, clarity emerges. Strength awakens. Revelation rises from the silence like sunlight breaking through clouds. Don't waste this moment. Don't rush through it like it's just something to survive. Don't clutter it with noise just because you're afraid of what you'll hear when everything else fades away. Because this holy hush is where confidence is born. This is where courage is cultivated. This is where your future starts to take shape. And when you finally start listening to that voice within the one that's always known, the way you realize something incredible, it was never gone. It was just drowned out. That voice, that's your breakthrough. That's your inner flame. It's always been there waiting for you to get quiet enough to hear it. So when you find yourself in that space, just you, your thoughts, and the silence, don't be afraid. Don't retreat. Lean in. Because when the distractions disappear and the spotlight dims, something remarkable begins to unfold. You begin to hear your own voice, not the one shaped by public opinion, not the one edited for approval, but the one designed for purpose. And you come face to face with a deeper truth. The voice you've been living by for so long wasn't really yours. Let's carry the thread forward, where we last stood in the silence. Finally beginning to hear our own voice, the one that's been hidden under the surface. You know, it's not just silence you're stepping into, it's the sacred space where clarity begins to echo. Because for so long, what we've really been battling is noise. The relentless noise of the world. The kind that seeps into your spirit. It tells you who to be, how to act, what to chase, and who to impress. And in all that chaos, there's been a voice. Your voice buried beneath layers of expectation and performance. The voice you've been avoiding, ignoring, silencing, just to fit in. That voice, that's the real you. And listen, this isn't just about positive self-talk. It's not about reciting empty affirmations. No, this is deeper. This is about listening. I mean, really listening. We've spent so much of our lives in performance mode, trying to measure up to someone else's definition of success, trying to win approval, earn love, prove our worth in a world that keeps shifting the finish line. But what happens when everything goes quiet? What happens when the lights go off, the crowd leaves, and all that's left is you? That's when the shift begins. That's when the truth surfaces. Because in that stillness, you no longer hear the demands of the world. You begin to tune in to something far more powerful. The voice inside you, the one that knows who you really are. Not the version others prefer. Not the one shaped by expectations, but the one rooted in truth. This voice isn't a whisper of insecurity, it's a roar of identity. It's the echo of God's truth inside you. It's the divine reminder of who you were always meant to be. It doesn't flatter you with fantasies, it anchors you with purpose. It tells you not what you should be, but what you already are. And in those moments of solitude when you're not performing or pretending, you begin to realize something beautiful. Your voice isn't fragile. It isn't small. It's essential. It's the voice that leads you toward your purpose. The one that knows your potential even on the days when you can't see it yourself. That voice, it's your guide out of the darkness. It's your invitation into the light. And here's the thing, when you finally begin to listen, truly listen, you don't just hear sound. You hear clarity. You hear conviction. You hear truth. And in a world drowning in noise, there is power in stillness. A kind of power that cannot be manufactured, only discovered. Because God doesn't always speak in the thunder. He doesn't always show up in the spectacular. Often, He speaks loudest in the silence. In that space where you're still, where you're open, where you're finally listening. And in that divine quiet, you begin to realize something earth-shaking. The voice you've been desperate to hear from the outside has been inside of you all along. It's God's voice woven into your soul. It's your voice finally aligned with His purpose for your life. And it's not distant. It's not unreachable. It's just been buried under the pressure to please, under the fear of rejection, under the weight of other people's dreams for you. But when you stop, when you pause, and choose to listen, instead of strive, something sacred happens. You remember that no one knows your heart like you do. And more importantly, no one knows your calling like the one who crafted it. So let me ask you genuinely, sincerely, what have you been telling yourself? What narrative have you allowed to run unchecked in your mind? What voices have you allowed to direct your destiny? Have they been true, or have they been loud? Because maybe, just maybe, you've been living by a story that was never meant to be yours. Maybe you've been trying to fulfill a script written by fear, signed by doubt, and directed by someone else's opinion. But the moment, and I mean the very moment you begin to listen to your own soul, the one grounded in grace and truth, everything changes. You start rewriting the story. You start taking back the pen. And page by page, word by word, you begin to break free. You break free from the lies that told you you're not enough. You break free from the labels that never belonged to you. You break free from the pressure to perform and the fear to be seen. And in that freedom, your voice, your true voice, rises. Let's continue from where we left off, from that moment of awakening when you finally stopped running from your own voice and began leaning into it. Because this right here is where real transformation begins. When you start listening to your own voice, not the one shaped by fear or filtered by doubt, but the one rooted in truth, you begin to speak differently. You speak with authority, not arrogance, not ego, but authority born from knowing exactly who you are. You stop searching for approval in other people's eyes because you've already been affirmed by the one who made you. You stop chasing validation because the Creator already declared you worthy. And in that newfound clarity, something powerful begins to rise in you. You begin to speak life over your own circumstances, especially the broken ones. You speak truth into the lies you've silently accepted for far too long. You speak courage into your fears, as if you're laying bricks of confidence one word at a time. And here's the shift: when you find that voice, you no longer wait around, hoping someone else will hand you the microphone. You stop looking for permission. You pick it up yourself. You become the voice not just of your story, but of your future. You lead your own life. You speak over it like someone who believes in the power of their words. Because suddenly you realize that the voice you've been dodging, the one you've buried beneath expectations and excuses, is the very voice that carries your destiny. It's your true self calling you forward. Yes, the world tried to tell you who to be. It tried to shape you into something palatable, predictable, acceptable. But now you stand in front of a choice. Will you keep echoing what they said about you? Or will you choose your voice? Will you align with the world's definition or with God's calling? Because you can choose, right now, to be true. True to the voice inside you. True to the path that's been etched in grace long before the noise began. True to the purpose that was placed in you before the opinions ever reached you. So I say, don't fear the silence. Don't run from the moments when it's just you, your thoughts, and your truth. Don't rush to fill the quiet with distractions. Because in those sacred pauses, you are standing closer to your true self than ever before. And here's the truth that might shake you a little: your voice is not weak. It is not small. It is not insignificant. It is in fact the most powerful force in your life. It's the compass pointing you to your purpose. It's the torch lighting the way in your dark seasons. It's the echo of the divine, reminding you of who you are even when the world forgets. And when you start speaking from that place, when your words align with your assignment, when your declarations reflect your destiny, nothing, and I mean nothing, can stop you. Because in the stillness, you don't just find your voice, you find your power. And my friend, that voice, that's the one that shifts atmospheres. That's the one that rebuilds broken things. That's the one that leads movements, transforms lives, and brings peace to chaos. You see, there's a deeper truth you need to hold on to. One of the most powerful truths you'll ever grasp. People can compliment you, they can applaud you, appreciate you, support you, but only God can complete you. Let that settle for a moment. It sounds simple, almost too familiar. But when you really get it, when it clicks, not just in your mind, but in your spirit, it changes everything. Because for so long, we've been taught that our worth comes from our connections. from our relationships, from our jobs, our roles, our image, our productivity, from how many people clap, how much attention we get, how perfect we seem. But none of it can truly fill the spaces within us. None of it can heal the emptiness, the uncertainty, the ache to feel whole. Not until we understand this one thing. Completion doesn't come from people. Completion comes from God. It always has. It always will. We'll uncover what it looks like to live complete, to operate not from emptiness, but from overflow. Because when your identity is rooted in God, everything else begins to fall into place. Continuing from where we left off, on the truth that only God can complete you, let's lean even deeper into what that means for how we live, how we love, and how we see ourselves. Because here's a hard truth: when you place your sense of fulfillment in the hands of other people, when your worth is tied to their validation, you are building your identity on shifting sand. You're setting yourself up for disappointment. Why? Because people change. People leave. People misunderstand. Even the ones who love you the most can fail to see your full value. And if who you are is determined by how they see you, you'll always be chasing approval like it's air. You'll run yourself ragged trying to earn acceptance that was never meant to define you in the first place. But here's the beautiful twist, the game changer. When your identity is rooted in God, when your self-worth is anchored in His unshakable love, then it doesn't matter what anyone else does or says. You stand firm. You breathe easy, because you know deep down in your bones that you are enough. Let me be clear. This doesn't mean relationships don't matter. Of course they do. We were made for connection. Love and community are incredible gifts, vital even. But what I'm saying is this: before you can ever truly give your heart to someone else, you must first give it fully to God. Because there are places in your soul that no person, not even the best, most well-meaning one, can reach. There are longings, fears, dreams, and wounds that only God understands. Only He knows you completely. Only He sees the whole picture, the things you hide, the things you don't even fully understand about yourself. And when you allow Him to step into those spaces, when you let Him complete you from the inside out, something transformative happens. You stop grasping for love. You stop begging for approval. You stop performing for belonging. Instead, you begin offering love from a place of overflow. You begin living with a fullness that doesn't depend on who's with you or who's left you. You become a vessel, not of desperation, but of divine confidence. There is a peace so profound that it almost feels otherworldly, a peace that enters when you realize you no longer need someone else to complete you. So many people are terrified of being alone. The fear of loneliness drives them into relationships that are unhealthy, unbalanced, or simply unaligned with who they are. But here's the truth. When you are connected to God, you are never truly alone. He walks with you in the silence. He whispers to you when others are silent. And His love. It doesn't change based on your performance. It doesn't increase when you succeed or decrease when you stumble. It's not conditional. It's not up for negotiation. It's constant. It's fierce. And it's deeply personal. And when you finally let that love flood the empty spaces inside, when you allow it to fill you, to ground you, to heal you, you stop searching for it in all the wrong places. You no longer chase relationships hoping to fill a void. You no longer fall into the trap of thinking another person will fix what's broken inside you. Because now you're secure. Secure in who you are. Not because of your resume. Not because of your relationship status. Not because of applause or attention. You're secure because you've been rooted in truth. Because you finally started to believe what God says about you. And when that happens, you stop settling for less than you deserve. You stop changing yourself to be liked. You stop sacrificing your worth to be chosen by people who were never meant to walk with you. Instead, you begin attracting the right people, those who recognize your light without trying to dim it. People who don't want to mold you into someone else, but who celebrate you for exactly who you are. Because when God completes you, you're not out here trying to prove anything anymore. You're not hustling for approval. You're not bending yourself to fit into someone else's mold. You're walking in freedom. Freedom to be whole. Freedom to be enough. Freedom to be seen not through the lens of the world, but through the lens of heaven. You are perfectly loved, perfectly accepted, perfectly designed for the purpose God has called you to fulfill. And that's the beauty of His love. It doesn't just patch you up. It makes you whole. It restores what was broken. It finds what was lost. It reclaims the parts of you that life tried to bury. And it breathes life into your soul until you rise in the fullness of who you were always created to be. So as we move forward, ask yourself this: are you living for validation or from completion? Because when you live from the truth that God has already made you whole, everything changes. Picking up from the truth we've just uncovered, that God's love completes you, we now begin to see the contrast between freedom and the trap the enemy wants you to fall into. Because, make no mistake, there is a trap. The enemy wants to keep you stuck in an endless cycle of approval-seeking, a loop where your value is always up for negotiation based on how others see you, respond to you, applaud you. He wants you to believe that love is something you have to earn, not something you can simply receive. That you've got to perform, impress, be perfect, constantly strive to deserve affection, worth, and belonging. But God's truth, it flips that lie upside down. God's love says you are already enough. Not because you've done everything right, not because you meet someone else's standards, but because He made you. And what He creates, He calls good. He doesn't wait for you to clean yourself up. He meets you exactly where you are, right now, in your questions, your flaws, your process. So stop chasing after people who make you feel like you're not enough. Stop handing your identity to those who can't see your worth. Stop waiting for someone else to validate what heaven has already confirmed. Because the right person, if and when they come, will not be the source of your worth. They'll simply reflect a love that already exists, a love that started with God, a love that's been written over your life since the beginning. When you are complete in Him, your identity shifts. You no longer look for validation in broken places. You stop accepting relationships, environments, or even thoughts that fall short of God's best for you. You become someone who walks with quiet confidence, not pride, but peace. And here's the deeper beauty when God fills you. He doesn't just fill you for you, He fills you so that you can overflow into the lives of others. You become a carrier of light, a vessel of peace, a bringer of joy. Not because everything is perfect, but because you are rooted in something eternal. You no longer live afraid, no longer tiptoeing through life wondering if you measure up, no longer questioning your worth in every interaction. Instead, you begin to walk in the bold, liberating truth of who you are in Christ. You are loved. You are chosen. You are enough. And when that truth sinks in, not just in your mind, but deep in your spirit, the weight of needing someone else to complete you begins to fall away. The pressure to be good enough for someone else dissolves. Why? Because you know you are already whole in Him. And in that wholeness, you find something the world can't touch. You find peace. You find joy. You find purpose. Not because you achieved something, not because someone picked you, but because you finally saw yourself the way God sees you. And here's one of the most freeing realizations you will ever come to: your happiness doesn't have to be tied to another person. Let that settle in for a moment. Too many people are walking through life with this unspoken belief: I'll finally be happy when I meet the right person, when I'm loved, when I'm seen. But that belief places your joy in someone else's hands. It gives your power away, and when you do that, you set yourself up for disappointment over and over again. Because people are human. People are imperfect. Circumstances shift. Emotions change. But the kind of happiness that's anchored in God. That joy doesn't waver. That peace doesn't depend on whether someone chooses to stay. It isn't shaken by rejection or absence. It's a joy that remains even when the world around you doesn't. That's why one of the greatest gifts you can ever give yourself is learning how to be happy alone, not lonely, but content. Not isolated, but secure. Because when your soul is settled in who God says you are, you're no longer desperate for someone else to fill the void. You carry the fullness within you. We'll begin to uncover how that inner strength transforms your relationships, not just with others, but with yourself, with your purpose, and with the life you're building. This is where emotional freedom begins. As we continue this journey of rediscovering our worth, here's a truth we all have to face. Relationships change. They evolve. They shift. And sometimes, no matter how much we hoped or believed otherwise, people we thought would be by our side forever walk away. And if your happiness is tethered to the ebb and flow of someone else's emotions, decisions, or presence, you'll constantly feel unsteady. You'll live on a tightrope trying to balance your joy on foundations that were never built to hold it. But there's a better way. When you begin to anchor your joy in yourself, not in ego, but in divine identity, when your happiness is grounded in your personal walk with God, in the deep understanding of who you truly are, then no matter what storms rage around you, you remain steady. You're not waiting for someone else to validate your existence. You've already been validated by the one who formed you. You're not chasing people to complete what feels unfinished inside. You've already been made complete in Him. You're no longer looking outward to discover your purpose, because you already know what you carry. You've stopped allowing circumstances to dictate your emotional weather, because your joy doesn't come from what's happening to you. It flows from what's been placed within you. And that, my friend, that's where true freedom begins. When you finally understand that your happiness doesn't have to be handed to you by someone else. When you grasp that no person, no job, no title, no approval can define your wholeness, then and only then can you start living fully. You start showing up boldly, fearlessly, no longer bound by the fear of loss, no longer shrinking back from the unknown, no longer imprisoned by the idea that your life must revolve around someone else's presence to have meaning. Let's be real for a moment. Many of us move through life carrying a deep, quiet fear of being alone. Society has painted solitude as something to avoid something that signals failure, emptiness, or rejection. The message we often absorb is this: if you're alone, something must be wrong. But what if that's not the truth? What if being alone isn't a curse, but a gift? I want to challenge that old narrative today. Being alone does not mean you're unloved. It does not mean you're forgotten or broken. Being alone simply means you have the opportunity, the sacred space, to connect deeply with the most important parts of yourself. It's a chance to listen, to reflect, to return. When you're alone, you begin to hear your thoughts without interruption. You rediscover your desires, your values, your voice, outside the noise of others' opinions and expectations. You stop being defined by the roles the world assigns you. You peel away the pressure to perform. You let go of the constant urge to be who everyone else wants you to be. And instead, you get to ask yourself questions that truly matter. Who am I when no one else is watching? What do I genuinely want out of this life? What has God placed in my heart that I've been too distracted to notice? And most importantly, how do I walk fully in the purpose He's designed just for me? And here's the beauty: when you're willing to sit with those questions, even when the answers are hard, something sacred begins to happen. You grow, you deepen, you become rooted in truth. Because when you know who you are and you're not afraid of your own company, that's when peace starts to settle in your soul. And this peace, it doesn't come from applause, it doesn't come from approval, it doesn't come from pleasing others or achieving milestones. It comes from being anchored in identity. It comes from knowing, without a doubt, that you are enough just as you are. That's the kind of peace the world can't take away. That's the kind of confidence that doesn't waver. And that's the kind of wholeness that leads to lasting joy. So as we move forward, keep asking those sacred questions. Keep leaning into the quiet. Because it's in that stillness, in that sacred solitude, that you're not just finding yourself, you're finding your foundation. And from there, everything begins to change. As we continue this journey of embracing solitude, not as something to fear, but something to cherish, there's a quiet power that begins to rise within you. Because in that solitude, healing begins. In the stillness, when the noise of the world finally fades away, you're given space to process what's been buried deep inside. You have room to breathe, to reflect, to revisit old wounds, not to reopen them, but to finally release them. You begin to face the pain you've carried for far too long, the mistakes you've replayed in your mind, the disappointments you never voiced, the heartbreaks you tried to ignore. And without the constant distraction of external noise, you're finally able to listen to your own heart, your own story, your own truth. In that quiet space, you can begin to forgive yourself, to let go of the shame, to lay down the guilt, to break the chains of regret that have kept you captive. You begin to give your heart something it's longed for: space to heal, space to grow, space to rebuild, not on a shaky foundation of external approval, but on the steady ground of divine identity. Because here's what you need to know: God never intended for your happiness to be dependent on anyone else. He never wanted you to feel like joy only comes when someone else shows up to complete you. God's desire has always been for you to find joy in Him, in who He created you to be, in the beauty, the complexity, and the strength He wove into you from the very beginning. The world will try to sell you a different story. It will say, you need someone to feel whole. You need a partner to feel loved. You need to belong to someone in order to belong anywhere at all. But here's the truth that breaks that lie wide open: you are already whole. You are already loved. You are already complete in Him. And once you know that, once you finally believe it, not just in your head, but in your heart, it unlocks a freedom like nothing else. It sets you free from desperation, free from dependency, free from settling for less than what you were created for. Now, don't get me wrong, this truth doesn't mean you'll never desire companionship. It doesn't mean you won't long for meaningful, deep relationships. We were created for connection. It's part of our design. But here's what changes. You stop needing relationships to fill the gaps. You stop choosing people out of fear of being alone. You stop handing your joy over to someone else's decisions. Instead, you begin to choose relationships from a place of fullness, of confidence, of worth. You start attracting healthy, life-giving connections. Relationships that are not about fixing or completing, but about mutual love, mutual growth, and mutual respect. You begin to walk differently. You start radiating a kind of peace that doesn't depend on who walks in or out of your life. So hear me clearly: stop waiting. Stop waiting for someone to give you permission to be happy. Stop waiting for a relationship to validate your worth. Stop waiting for the world to say you're enough. Because you already are. Right now, in this moment. Without changing a thing. God has already claimed you as His own. He's already given you what you need to walk in peace, to walk in purpose, to walk in joy. And when you learn to be happy alone, not lonely but fulfilled, you begin to understand something sacred. You don't have to rely on anyone else to carry your joy. You stop depending on others to fill your cup, because now you know the only one you need to depend on is God. And when you rest in His love, when you trust in His timing, in His plan, in His provision, you step into a kind of joy that the world can't steal. Not people, not circumstances, not setbacks, because you found the source. And that source, it will never run dry. Learning to be happy alone isn't just about freedom from fear. It's about awakening to who you really are. It's about discovering what you're capable of, not because someone is standing beside you, but because of what's already been placed inside you. There's something undeniably powerful about rising on your own standing, strong in your truth, and realizing that you are not fragile, you are fierce. Not incomplete, you are whole. After discovering the strength that comes from standing in solitude, something extraordinary begins to unfold. It's in those moments, those quiet, powerful moments of independence, when you truly start to see it. Your potential, your worth, your divine purpose. And you begin to realize none of it depends on the presence or approval of another person. For far too long, many of us have measured our value through the lens of what we can do for others. We've worn our sacrifice like a badge, thinking the more we give, the more we are. We've been told directly or subtly that our worth is tied to how much we contribute, how much we please, how much we can prove. We've let ourselves be defined by our roles at work, at home, in relationships. But what if the truest version of you was never about what you do, but simply about who you are? That's what solitude reveals. When you finally stand on your own, fully present, fully aware, you discover that your worth doesn't come from your ability to serve others. It comes from your identity, from the uniqueness that God crafted into you before the world even had a name for it. And when you're alone, not lonely, but alone, you're invited into a sacred process. You get to turn inward, not with selfishness, but with intention. You get to ask the questions that matter. What do I need? What do I dream of? What was I born to do? So many people go through life on autopilot, jumping from one relationship to another, one job to the next, one role to the next title, without ever pausing to ask, who am I really? But when you pause, when you allow the world to quiet, you find space, you find clarity, you find you. You begin to reconnect with the parts of yourself that got buried under responsibility or hidden beneath the expectations of others. You rediscover what sets your soul on fire, what brings you joy, not borrowed happiness, but real, deep, sustaining joy. You begin to dream again. And as that clarity deepens, something else shifts. You stop measuring your success by the reactions of others. You stop letting opinions sway your direction. You stop seeking validation from places that were never meant to define you, because you've found your anchor in God. You've found your approval in His voice, not theirs. And that changes everything. You begin to live differently, freer, bolder, more aligned with your purpose. You stop settling for less than what you were made for. You stop waiting for someone to give you permission to be who you already are. You stop doubting the gift that lives inside you. And when you walk in that confidence, you don't just change your life, you begin to shape the world around you. You make bold choices. You take courageous steps. You become someone who doesn't just dream, but builds. You live with intention. You move with direction. You follow the path God has placed before you, no matter how unconventional, no matter how misunderstood. And what's even more beautiful, as you grow, evolve, and stand strong in your identity, you begin to attract the right people. The kind of people who see you, who don't try to fix you or complete you, but who celebrate you as you are. People who challenge you to grow, who support your journey, who respect your solitude and honor your strength. You no longer need someone to fill a void, because there is no void. You're whole. Now relationships become about partnership, not dependence. About sharing your life, not needing someone to give it meaning. You realize that the greatest relationships don't complete you, they complement who you've already become. Because the journey to being happy alone has never been about isolation. It's been about truth, about learning that you are enough, that you are whole, that your value is not up for debate. It's already been written by the one who created you. So take that time. Get to know yourself. Embrace the silence. Reflect. Heal. Grow. And in that journey, you'll uncover the life you were always meant to live, not a life chasing applause or seeking permission, but a life lived boldly, freely, and authentically. A life where you no longer wonder if you're enough. You know you are. And in that knowing, in that sacred, unshakable truth, you'll find what so many spend their lives searching for: true happiness.